I'm not crying. You all are crying.
Man, I'm in my feelings. I'm like, we need a break.
That is a
We
song.
need
That
a
is a
break.
hell of a song. All the presentations, fantastic. And there's also, so I know there's so many great musical minds in the chat, and the panels on the audience. This is a great version of Prince and Mary J. Blige. I think it was like an iHeart Music, some kind of thing. And Mary J. actually, she did a pretty good
Really?
job with it as well. Adam, and that was fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was telling around there's a version with Mary J. Blige, Prince and Mary J. Blige,
Hmm.
some kind of iHeart Music thing. It was like 10, 12 years ago, something like that. Something like that. I don't know. That was a great version as well.
So many good ones, and then so many
Absolutely.
not so good ones.
There's a few.
I
There's a few.
deliberately put in a few that I thought would be controversial. I think Madonna got a few comments in the chat.
Well, Miley Cyrus just recently did it with Brittany Howard for the SNL
Yeah,
50. That was
That
very
was
good as
good.
well. Yeah.
adding Brittany Howard will always increase your cred.
Yeah, you could do Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, Brittany Howard. I'm sure it'll come out okay.
Yes.
Well, I'm Greg Howard. I'm a musician, producer, composer. This is like my fourth or fifth symposium, so I want to thank Deanza for always having me. Always learn so much. I'm like a Prince snob, but here I'm definitely never the smartest person in the room, which is always a good thing. Always learn so much. Big Sexy, thank you very much, man, for your Dusty Rose impression. I do that. I annoy everybody in my life with my Dusty Rose, the American Dream, son of a plumber. So I appreciate you for that. And Rhonda, thank you so much for just that cultural zeitgeist in that moment. And Adam, man, just thank you for just taking us in and picking apart such a great song, a song that's always going to make you just feel something. Now, I just like to actually start there. I'm just going to kind of go in order. Nothing compares to you. Uh, there's so many people that I meet in my life and my travels that don't even know Prince wrote it. They always kind of attribute it to Sinead O'Connor. Adam took us through all the different versions, and it's always going to make you feel something. Rhonda, can you just give us your opinion, your perspective on that song? What does that make you feel? Is that a song of grief? Is that an optimistic song? Because it can feel like losing someone. It could feel like a reconciliation. It's sad at the same time, optimistic, which is Prince's gift for making us feel multiple
Mhm.
things, love and lust at the same time, grief and optimism at the same time. Just give us your perspective, really, like on that song, what it means to you, and why would Prince give such a beautiful gem to the family? And kind of put yourself in his frame. What did he hope for? What did he hope the song would do for them? If you can uh, synthesize what I just threw at you.
Yes, that's a fantastic question. I would say to the first part of your question of what is the song? Is it, about sadness or grief or loss? I think it's all of those things. I think like a lot of the folks in the room today, I was 10 the first time I heard it. So it didn't mean the same thing to me in 1985. I loved it. I thought it was pretty and I was um fascinated with the music of it, just the fact that it's just these strings and this saxophone, which I think at that time was a very new musical experience for me. And I thought it was a really pretty song, but I would not be, I think it was maybe college when the song really took a turn for me. So I love Sinead's version. It was dramatic and it was, I love Sinead O'Connor, she's one of my favorite artists. Um, and I was a teenager, when her version came out. So I was experiencing it differently. But by the time the 92, 93 versions of it came out, and I was a little bit older, and it then has this very gospel rooted feeling to me. Now, when I go back and listen to Prince's original demos and the family's original recording, I hear that imprint. But, in 85, I didn't have that vocabulary. Um, I think it's a really interesting question to consider why Prince gave it to the family. I don't know um, for real or for true, but I think that part of it was because I think, as Law was saying earlier today, because vocally Susanna and Paul could pull it off. And while Prince always has such amazing musicians around him, and we all know that nobody who played with Prince was a slack, in terms of vocalists, that wasn't always the case. And so in Paul and Susanna, he had some people who knew what the hell they were doing. They knew how to get behind the mic and how to give it. Susanna's got a very different vocal quality, of course, you know, compared to Rosie, but even compared to Jill and others. And she is a singer. I mean, I know that sometimes people kind of blow her off as being fluffy or whatever, but Susanna's a singer. And I think that Prince understood that their voices together worked gorgeously and they could really pull the song off. So maybe that was his thought, you know, that they can deliver this song. I don't know if he ever saw it going any further than the album being an album cut for them, but it definitely is effective. And I think that over the years with so many people, and Adam, you showed this gorgeously in your presentation, especially that montage at the end, the song is just incredibly powerful and emotional. And I think that you can listen to it when you're grieving loss or, you know, what have you, but there is that reconciliatory element of it as well that I think speaks to just our overall emotional growth and maturation as we go through life.
I love that. Thank you. Adam, I'm gonna pose the same question to you. What is this song? I mean, you spent this time putting this together. What is this? You looking through Prince's eyes. I mean, what is this? You know, this beast
Uh,
of a song.
well, I think Prince is quite impenetrable. You know, he's so good at playing a role or creating a character. So, you know, there's all those stories of what the different possible inspirations for this song could be. You know, was it his relationship with Susanna? Was it Jerome Benton's breakup, or was it his housekeeper? You know, and this is all just goes into the mythology. So it kind of doesn't matter what Prince was trying to do with it. He had the creative urge. He gave it to the family. I think he just thought it would probably fit in the album that they were constructing. But I think the most important thing is the way that it's touched every artist that's felt compelled to cover it. And obviously Sinead connected with it very deeply, as has everybody else, you know, who's, for better or worse, you know, you might not like every version of it, but the people that want to cover that song are really, really, really feeling it. So that's Prince's genius, is that it kind of doesn't matter what the initial inspiration was, but he's able to just shoot directly into the hearts of the people listening to the music.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Mark, I mean, the same for you. Um, like, what is this song to you? And kind of going off what Adam said, for Prince to do this in this moment, to do it for the family, and then just also kind of drop such a gorgeous song that really didn't get a push outside of radio play. You know, obviously didn't get a video. Um, like, what do we make of this? You know, looking back in history in 1985, you know, with this song particularly.
Well, looking back in '85, um, the band never really got a chance to really gel and do their thing. They broke up prematurely, so things just got dropped. And the song and Prince was so prolific as a writer. He didn't, and he never wanted to look back. So he's like, you know what, whatever, let's keep it moving. And to her credit, and I've been critical of Miss O'Connor before, and I'm sure I will be again, but she exposed it to some new listeners, you know. And then a lot of people like myself are like, we know this song. And, a lot of the Prince people are like, we know who this is, so don't feel it. But it was so big, and a lot of people, when they heard it, they're like, oh, this is a Prince song? Now I gotta hear it. And so they did their thing. Now, to me, to answer your question, it's hard to say is it a song about grieving, about loss, about the end of a relationship? Yes. But is it about telling someone, hey, you're the one? Anything I do moving forward is going to be paled in comparison to you. So I get that too. Um, Adam, fantastic video. I'm stealing your idea, by the way. Um, I see in the chat a lot of people are saying, a lot of people cover this and this and that. But I have to tell you guys, when Prince passed, and I'm home, I'm just, shook up, and I'm seeing all these various tributes. I didn't know who Chris Stapleton was. And someone sent me this on YouTube. I'm like, who is this bearded roughneck? Man, get out of here with that. I'm like, you know what? Don't be that dude. Listen, man. Chris put his foot in that. At the end of the song, this is me. Well, Chris did his thing. And that made me a fan of his. And I take that back. That made me curious about him. And then I watched him at the Grammys a couple of years ago, and he did his song called Cold. And once again, I'm a fan. And so when people do the song, no matter who they are, and they reach that emotion genuinely from a genuine place, oh man, it's so beautiful. It is so beautiful. And I'm not saying Miss O'Connor didn't come from a genuine place. I don't know her like that. I'm not even going to get into that. But I've heard so many other people do it, and they just let it rip. And when you got Annie Lennox covering your song, dude, does it get better than that?
Yeah,
Really?
it does if you add Wendy on guitar.
See, you caught me slipping now. I was going to say that too. And it is such a beautiful, timeless piece. And it is unfortunate that Prince didn't get a chance to see this because it only really came about, all the treatments, because of his passing. But so many people loved him, musicians especially, and they loved him. And they're like, I want to do this. I heard Springsteen do it. So many people have done it. I'm like, wow. And it's cool for me, just as an observer, to watch people from different genres do it. Like my man Chris Cornell did it. I'm like, that's what it's about, man. When you got musicians, boundary lines, genre, fuck all that. A good song is a good song. And they took it and just did their thing their way and exposed it to other people who dug it, who did it their way. And that's what music is about to me.
I love that. And
Um,
to your point, he inspired literally everybody. Nine Inch Nails, like you said, um, everybody. Adam, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that's one thing that's so great about this song is that it's actually quite simple. It's a very simple composition, so it's very easy to adapt into whatever style that particular artist is working with. It's hard to take Round Midnight and do 57 different genres with it. You could try, but I think this one lends itself very easily into Chris Cornell's style, or even that interesting R&B one, Leona Berlin. I saw she was getting a few comments. Like that's maybe not the most emotional, soulful version, but it's pretty hip. I enjoyed it.
It was very dope. That was new for me, so I'm gonna have to check that out.
Same.
And going back to you, Rhonda, thinking about the family, and as Mark was alluding to, Prince's wide, just reverberations of inspiration. Did Prince, and being a little critical here, did he miss an opportunity with the family? Like really looking at the fallout from the time, looking at the fallout from Vanity and Apollonia 6, and saying, this could be a great thing. I can take parcel pieces and put this thing together with, like you're saying, with Susanna, such a great vocalist. Paul was such a great tenor offering on his vocals. Did Prince miss an opportunity,
Yes.
commercially and critically with this? Oh, short or long answer,
Yeah.
please.
So a couple of thoughts there. One, absolutely. I think we all agree that there was a missed opportunity. And I said something in the chat in a previous session that I think part of the challenge for Prince was that he was so great at so many things except attention span. And so he moved, we all admire how quickly he moved on from things. And I think that for what he needed to do in the whole breadth of his life as a person and as an artist, being able to keep it pushing was probably very, very useful. But there were times when there was more time needed, and the family is absolutely that. I had the opportunity to interview F Deluxe in 2011 when they were starting to really promote Gaslight. And we unfortunately, I don't know where that interview is now because the website that it used to exist on died in 2016. But we talked a lot just kind of during our conversation about that missed opportunity and all of the different things that were happening in Prince's universe when the Families album came out, and why it just was like almost doomed from the start. And again, even at Celebration a few years ago, I think in 2018, when the family was there and they did a panel, they talked about, we didn't have a contract. We didn't really, it was chaos. And so the business wasn't taken care of, I think, in the way that it could have been to really protect them and give them a foundation. And then Prince being so all over the place, again, it's great and it's genius, but it also means that there's just this debris that's left in the wake of that. And so I think his just moving fast and not really being able to fully realize things is definitely something that, you know, did a detriment, or, you know, just did a disservice to him and to these brilliant artists that he was putting together, in the midst of all of the great work of his own that he was producing and sharing with the world.
Absolutely. And Adam, just to follow up on that, is that again, do you agree that that was a missed opportunity? And also, was letting Jimmy and Terry, well, I mean, are all these, obviously hindsight's 2020, but are these missed opportunities to have your legacy on par with, say, you know, because most of the world obviously knows Michael Jackson, but musically, you know, this could have been the correct way to do the Parliament Funkadelic Kingdom, you know, to do the Purple Kingdom the correct way. So how big of a miss was this? And is it detrimental to Prince's overall legacy?
I think many things that Prince did were detrimental to his legacy, but that was just him. You know, he was a very contradictory person. But yeah, definitely that his talent was. You know, he's been compared to Miles Davis in the sense that he's great at putting together these units of people that can add in things that he can't even do. You know, once you add Claire Fisher has a skill set that is outside of Prince's skill set. Eric Leeds has a skill set that is outside of Prince's skill set. But Prince benefits from having Eric's bebop language, for example, on his tracks. So he could have weaponized that if he was really strategic about it, of course. And I've never thought of the Parliament Funkadelic collective kind of family idea before, but that would make perfect sense. Imagine this whole Paisley Park roster. I mean, look at 1-800 New Funk. You know, that's awesome. I love that album. And if he just had this stable and they spent 10 years just all making records together, it would be unbelievable. So I think it was a huge missed opportunity. Having said that, he's very much on his own trajectory, and look what he was able to achieve, even with those missed opportunities. But I do feel bad for the people in those groups. The time, yes, do whatever you can to not let Jimmy and Terry go. Do whatever you can to keep St. Paul on board with the family. Maybe promote the album. Maybe line up a tour. Maybe delegate some things and release a bit of control.
That's kind of where I was going.
Have somebody at Warner
Delegation.
Brothers in charge of the logistics of running the Paisley Park stable of artists. You know, except for Good Question, maybe don't sign them in the first place.
Well, and Marc, round that out, playing revisionist history. How do you A&R this family situation? Kind of going off what Rhonda and Adam said. How do you hop in your DeLorean and go back and work the family situation?
Well, the problem that I see is when you assemble so many artists and you're the main creative spark, the demands on you are just tremendous. You know, I'll use Rick James as an example. When he came out, he was doing, I think this is right around Cold Blooded or Throwing Down. He did the Mary Jane Girls first album, which was very, very good. Then he did the Stone City Band album, which is also very good. Process and the Do-Rags. The song was good. The rest of the album, he spread himself too thin. Now, to answer the question about Jimmy and Terry leaving, I think, and Jimmy put it better than I ever could, Jimmy said that Prince inspired him to be better, to do more. You know, my favorite interview with him is when he's sitting at the Red Bull Academy with Terry and they're talking about it. And Prince will say, as they're doing 777, Prince will say, Jimmy Jam, what are you doing with your left hand? Oh, I'm just standing here playing the chords. Got to be better than the record. And would learn that. And he's all, Jimmy Jam, why aren't you in choreography? And so we do the choreography. And then Jimmy took it to a point where he will pull out the little hanky 777, and he's doing his thing. He's like, I couldn't do that without Prince showing me that I was capable of doing that. So what a lot of these cats found that voice without the exposure of Prince, hopefully, but we don't know. So they needed that boost to do their thing. You know, Jesse was going to do his thing regardless. And then you have the point of, like, if you look at the original Seven album, these guys were all established at that point. So who's gonna run point on that? You know, if I'm Morris, I want to do this. I'm Jelly Bean, I want to do that. And I'm Jesse, my guitar's not loud enough. You need the one voice to say, this is how it's going to be. And then you have to, as the musician in that group, you have to be willing to accept that direction. And that's hard. But I will say this as well. When all this fell apart, and we'll go from September 9th was Yokohama, and then you go from that time to, I believe, early March of '87, where he did For Those on Valium at First Avenue, where he introduced the new Sign of the Times band. He essentially stepped away, said, you know what, look, Dream Factory, Crystal Ball, that ain't happening. I'm going to do my thing. And he locked himself away, comes back with Sign of the Times. Boom. Would that have happened if he's running all these other projects? I don't think so. I don't think so. So, you know, it worked out, but did we miss opportunities? Yeah, he did. But he also made some gains as well. So it's kind of a wash either way.
Sign of the Times is a nice save. So it's actually a beautiful save.
Yes.
So I appreciate that. Actually, I got a great question. It's actually kind of where I was going. And Ron, I'm going to come right back to you as a Q&A from the crowd. Carol wants to know if you can speak to some of the poetry and screams of passion. And I'm going to, you know, I like a nice BOGO, so I'm going to throw a layered joint at you. Okay. The poetry and screams of passion also is the family, screams of passion, nothing compares to you and the like. Is this Prince's pure, unfiltered romanticism? Like the time is Prince's pure, you know, slimy record label, like pimp, the whole pimp thing, you know, everything. It's Prince himself is Prince the rock star, Prince the superhero in his own story. Is the family that kind of Rudolph Valentino that he wrote about in the Bangles joint? You know, is this the personification of that with the poetry of Screams of Passion, of course?
Absolutely. I think, you know, for those of us who are intimately familiar with not only Prince's music, but everything that he created with others in mind, we know that there's a way that he wrote for female vocalists and musicians. We know that there's a way that he wrote for the time. And yes, the poetry and the romanticism, the sort of over the top romanticism, I think, of the family fits right within that trajectory of how he's imagining these offshoots of his own creativity to be personified and to come into being. I think that, again, kind of, there was a comment in the chat that I wanted to tap into, and that was, I think Capria was asking, you know, why didn't the family continue without him? And I think that part of the challenge there is that he established something for them, and they had not been together long enough to have that vibe together. 26 years later on the F Deluxe album, they do, and you hear that coming through. But at that point, you know, he had kind of pulled some disparate folks from different parts of his world and created a world for them. You know, shout out to Crystal Wise and others who talk so much about Prince's world making. But they hadn't been in that world long enough with one another to be able to then replicate what he had given them. The time was a whole different story because they had been together in some cases since they were kids, and they had gone through these various levels of maturity and development as musicians to where they could just vibe off of each other and they knew what was what. I don't think that the family had the chance to really get to know each other as humans or as artists that way yet. But I definitely think that poetry, there was some promise there. And it would have been very interesting to see, Susanna talked on Friday about how Prince was already kind of thinking about a second family album, and that one was supposed to be more Susanna Forward, where she's more prominently featured on on lead vocals. So it would have been interesting to see what that might have been had he been able to kind of give them a little bit more time, and maybe by the end of a second album, they would have been ready to really fly on their own, and they could have just continued if, you know, if other things hadn't gotten in the way.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. And there's another question from the crowd. I want to throw this one at Adam. Um, this is from Joy. What would a theatrical production based on Nothing Compares to You look like? And I'm going to add on to that. What would also a cinematic version look like? I mean, is this a melodramatic rom-com where, you know, someone's
It
picking
better
up the
not be.
pieces? Someone's picking up the
Um,
pieces of their life after grief or breakup. I mean, what does that look like in a different medium? You know, this amazing song.
I have not had a great amount of time to consider this, mere seconds, but I think that it might not be a good idea. I think when like I think of like a Philip K. Dick short story that is some high concept sci-fi thing, which is a really good idea for 5 minutes, and when you put Ben Affleck in it and drag it out for 2 hours, all of a sudden there's a lot of filler. I think maybe adding, you know how I was saying earlier that anybody can interpret that song any way they want, and that's why it resonates with them. Maybe putting specific plot lines and things would be detrimental to the enigma of the song. Having said that, maybe if I think of what my fantasy cinematic version would be, let me think. I am a bit of a film buff. Maybe like who's a really emotional director? All my favorite directors tend to be sort of strange technicians like Stanley Kubrick or David Lynch, but
I was gonna
I
say David
think
Lynch, very weird. That would be
it would be too dark. We
yeah,
need something a bit lighter. Like maybe it
right,
does. Maybe it needs to be Nora Ephron when Harry met
right.
Sally. I don't know. It's
Darren
unanswerable.
Aronofsky, very dark. You know,
No, definitely not. No, let the Trent Reznor version of Nothing Compares to You be in that film.
absolutely, absolutely. I thought that was just a great question from the crowd.
Yeah, for
Just the
sure.
life that song it tends to give.
Well, we're going to see if that Purple Rain musical ever comes out. We're going to see what that's like, aren't we?
Yeah, we'll see. I'm not gonna just like with the documentary. You know, we're all just kind of sitting here waiting. Um,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think I got a couple more. And Mark, there's one question I want to throw at you before I get back to the Q&A from the crowd. We talked about the fallout, and you did a great job illustrating that, going from the family from 85 into Parade 86, and then just the big explosion from Sign of the Times. But is this also like kind of short-sightedness on the part of St. Paul, like leaving like too early? Like, should you just ride it out with Prince? Or I mean, I see Adam shaking his head. I mean, he gave you some bangers. I mean, High Fashion, every version I've heard, Mutiny. I mean, you got certifiable bangers. These are not even hits. These are bangers. Now, possibly the most beautiful song he's, maybe ever written is, at least 15 of those to consider, but Nothing Compares to You is up there. I mean, should St. Paul have written this out a little bit more and said, look, man, do Sign at Times. Let's talk before you jump into Love Sexy, maybe. I don't know.
I think Paul should have at least had the conversation. My understanding is Paul just bounced, and the thing is, Prince put him out front for a reason. He saw something in him that he could do this. And his family, from what I understand, are just outstanding musicians. So Paul had the goods. Now, I don't recall if there was a follow-up to Paul's first album on MCA. If it was, it didn't make much noise. And I'm not being critical here. I'm just speaking factually. Now, had he hung around and said, let me wait this out. Let him do his thing over in France, and whatever happens with the revolution is going to happen. I'm just going to hang out. And then showing that loyalty, I'm sure Prince would have done something with it. I'm sure he would have. Would it have been, who knows what it would have been? Maybe Prince would have seen Paul's song Intimacy, which is the cut, by the way. Maybe he would have seen that and done something else with it. Who knows? But I think he left too early, yes. Now, I'm sure MCA came calling. I'm sure they had the typical bullshit contract in their hand. And, Paul just saw the opportunity and he left. And I think it was a mistake, but I'm also not in his shoes either. But one thing before I forget, Greg, if you go to the Dusty Rhodes Memoirs of an American Dream and go to page 224, tell me what you see. I'll just leave it at that.
I'm gonna jump on Jeff Bezos site right now as soon as we get off and go grab that. Thank you so much. There's a couple great Instagram pages. Non-context Dusty Rhodes. It's just Dusty saying things, and non-context Ric Flair. It's just them saying things, and it just always applies. Kind of like this song. And I know we're running up against it with time. Another great question from the Q&A section, and Rhonda, I'll come back to you on this. Favorite book written about Prince, and I'll even extend that to any kind of obviously they're all not authorized, but non-authorized documentary online. One of my favorites was from BBC back in the day, The Prince of Paisley Park, which was that cemented me as a Prince fan as a youngin'. But books, documentaries, any kind of reels, reenactments of Prince that you'd like to share with everyone that you really enjoy.
So I have to make this confession. It has been 7 hours. No, I'm just kidding.
Well
Since
played.
especially since Prince passed, it's very hard for me to read a lot of the books that have been published because I'm just not ready. Like, it took me forever to just read his memoir, which is, we all know, was like technically 2 pages, right? I kept trying and then I would just fall apart. So what I've been doing over the past almost 10 years is just collecting. I have a lovely collection of books, some of which were written by folks who've appeared in these symposia, people I trust, who I believe will do his legacy right through their scholarship. I've occasionally, since Prince's passing, watched 1 or 2 documentaries, but again, because I don't necessarily trust the good faith, I'm just like, prior to his passing, and particularly like in the 80s and 90s, when there were just all these random books, there were tons that I would buy with my little allowance money. And I don't remember if there were any at that time that I felt were particularly informative because I didn't know what I didn't know at that time. It's very easy to say now, yeah, that book was great or this one wasn't. So I was just reading them as a little voracious fan. But I will say that all of the books that I've gotten since Prince's passing, I've at least looked through them enough to kind of get a vibe for what they are. And I feel like the fam community, and that's kind of balanced with a scholarship community, is doing an amazing job of talking about his work and recontextualizing it, and making it more, if you will, more accessible for others. But I don't know. I definitely will say that I'm not a fan of like Prince tribute bands, like the ones where people dress up in various iterations that are always timeline wrong. That makes me very nervous. But when a band of just badass musicians gets together and they decide to play a Prince song, I mean, I've done it myself with my band, yes. But if y'all are just going to dress up in Purple Rain shit, I'll miss the show. But like, that kind of stuff, I think that keeping his music out there and writing about his work is what keeps the legacy alive and brings new fans to the playground. So I'm grateful for that.
I appreciate that because nobody ever does Love Sexy era, blowout hair Prince. Like, there's a ton of eras to choose from. Like,
Listen, and I'm
the
so
polka
jealous of
dots.
his hair from that, right?
Polka
Like, I
dots,
mean,
man.
that's a
Come
whole
on, man.
look, guys. It's an opportunity.
There's so much to choose from. They always take the low hanging Purple Rain fruit, man. Not even Parade, slick back, leather coat, midriff. So much to choose from. Adam, is there anything you can share with us? Any recommendations? Boom. There we go. The Maite book,
Yes,
yes.
my taste book. That one.
Yes.
Yeah.
How she recorded this as an audiobook and talked about the birth of their son and held it together, I will never know. But this is the most honest, authentic thing I've ever read on Prince about the man, you know. And I like to break down the music. That's my angle on things. This one is incredible because this was the first book, Pop Life by Dave Hill, that talked about all the bootlegs and all the vault tracks. And he this is where I first heard of the names of all those vault tracks. And I'm like, Rebirth of the Flesh, that sounds amazing. And I'm imagining what these are all like. He was onto this stuff. And also I really like his tone. He's not a Prince worshipper. He obviously loves the art, but he's got a really balanced perspective, and he puts those sorts of opinions in there without going, you know, like right into the negative as some books do. And I despise those books, but this is a really great balance. He's got a great tone. So they're my recommendations.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm gonna have to. I don't have that Pop Life book, so
Well, hold on,
have to
Greg.
look.
If we're making
Yes, sir.
recommendations here,
Yeah, I was coming to you next, Big Sexy.
come on,
Don't
all
ever
right.
think that I was gonna bypass Big Sexy. Come on, man.
I can't, you know, reach my copy, but the Per Nielsen book, Dance Music Sex Romance, to me that's the one. And as far as video, I don't know how many have seen Slave Trade, that talks about the whole Warner's beef. That is required viewing because
Absolutely.
they broke it down. And I've had conversations with my man Michael Bland, and he filled in a couple of spots for me. But Slave Trade is what really breaks it down. In fact, I show that to my music clients so they understand what's going on here as far as this industry, because even now the artists just aren't being treated fairly. They're just not. It's horrible. That's why I do what I do. But Dance Music Sex Romance, yes, highly recommended.
I forgot a video. So the BBC Omnibus special, even though it's a bunch of talking heads saying Prince was a genius, in between that is all that amazing after show footage and sound check footage. Where did that come from, and why has that not been released in a more complete form? Because somebody went through all that footage to pick that. That is just hanging around, and it's superb quality and really one of his peaks. Love Sexy era, right? 1988, incredible.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I know we're up against it. D'Angelo, thank you so much. I don't know if anyone has anything else to add. You put me on such a great panel. I feel like there's a bit of favoritism because you always give me such delicious, just ambrosia for the mind panels to moderate. So entirely grateful. Adam, Rhonda, Big Sexy, thank you all so much. I learned so much.
Thank you.
And
This was awesome.
man, this is amazing.
D'Angelo,
Always.
thank you for letting me be a part of this. I loved it. I love the fact that you come from the academic mind space with this. I loved it. Thank you. You do great work.
You're welcome.
Yes. Amen.